Forgiving others and ourselves is not necessarily because they deserve the forgiveness, but because we want peace. Most people on their deathbed, all they want is peace. And often we have great difficulty in forgiving ourselves, which is the most important one to forgive. Forgiving ourselves that we ever got in that situation. Forgiving ourselves when we get ill, that we've held on to anger, resentment, etc. So forgiving ourselves is really important. And many people ask me, well, how do I forgive? So a very good way is to really close your eyes and just ground yourself, putting a grounding cord down to the center of the earth and bringing in universal energy and really coming down into your heart and seeing the picture clearly from all angles, all perspectives, because we usually only have our own perspective, which is a little narrow because we don't like to see what we have done usually. Well, I didn't. It was very covered up. So when we close our eyes, come into our heart and really have a look at what happened and open our hearts to the other person, we gradually get a bigger picture of the situation. And we may see where we, out of ego, fear, have moved away from the person and they've been defensive and cold or whatever, moved away from us. So there's no joining. So the thing is to have a resolution, have a joining, which is love. And that comes about from, first of all, pinpointing in your body where you feel pain, and then you can really ask the pain what it's trying to tell you, or any emotional charge you have on something. And in some cases, say I had a person who as a young child witnessed a murder, and she was told if she ever told anybody she'd be killed. So can you imagine that emotional charge held in her? When she came to see me, she was 50 years old. And it had impacted her whole life. So it's not a scary thing to do if you realize it's just an emotional charge and everything's knotted up around it. But we bury it deep because it's too scary to go into. But realize if you're in a safe place, you can go into it. Nobody's going to hurt you. And then once you see all aspects of it, you can make a choice to forgive or not. And if you're not willing, then don't do it. But if you are willing from the heart, you can genuinely let it go and just say, I forgive you, whatever I may have done or you may have done, and I choose to let it go. And you can see the energy leaving your body. And cords, we're connected to another person with cords of energy. And anger is the strongest cord of all, stronger than love. So even if you've got an abusive person out of your life, you're still connected through anger. Ha ha. So releasing them releases you fully. Means say, you don't have to attract other people who are abusive or come back next time around and deal with the same person. You may as well just get it over in one fell swoop. So you will feel the energy leaving you and you'll feel a release and you may start crying, and that's fine because you're just clearing away the debris of energy. And then you will feel a sweetness, such a sweetness, which is just love. And you can give the other person your blessing, and then you are totally free and at peace. And the same goes for yourself, forgiving yourself for whatever you added or participated in. Even if you were standoffish and cold and distant, you were contributing to the situation. So forgive, let go, and just set yourself free. Whoa, you just feel so much lighter and lighter, and just more love and joy can come into your life. Fun, huh? So what happens to us when we die? Do we live a life and just go up in a puff of smoke? Do we disappear altogether? I hadn't given it much thought until my father died, and he was always around me. And a friend of mine went to see a medium. She said, "You owe me £50 because the medium, it was your father wanting to talk to you." So I finally agreed, went to this medium, and she said, "Your father's here, and she's with somebody called Andrew." And I couldn't believe it. Andrew? It was a child I had to let go at age 16. And I had a lot of grief about that. My father knew nothing of it. So there was Andrew sitting there. And I said, "I'm so sorry. I had to abort you. I had no money. I was a child. I had no way of taking care of you." And Andrew said it was our soul agreement. He wanted to come in, be born, and experience rejection. And on my side, I had to experience great grief and great loss, which instigated me to leave Australia and go to Europe. I just couldn't stay there anymore. So in the grand scheme of things, we helped each other. So, I mean, I just about fell off the chair at Andrew sitting there, and it just brought me such peace of mind. So my father had brought him in to talk to me. And then he said at the end of it, "Tell your mother I have the dog." And I said, "What dog? What are you talking about?" And he said, "I have your mother's dog." And I said, "Well, I don't know anything about this, but I'll call her afterward and say you've got the dog." So I was in London and I called my mother in Australia and I said, "Dad said to say he's got your dog." And she burst out crying and she says, "How did you know about any dog?" I said, "I didn't know anything." She says, "I just had the dog put down and I was so depressed and so upset." "Well, that's great. He's got the dog, so we don't have to worry about that anymore." So that was proof to me that life carries on. And my father actually helped me many times to put messages across when something bad was going to happen to me. So he'd come in and say, "Put your boxing gloves on, girl, and deal with this." So he never really left. And when people die, they're actually much freer because they're not carrying all the burdens of, living on earth. We have to find our rent. We have to, work. We have to, it's heavy going. So they're free. They've lifted their burden. They're very light. And so it's only a thin veil separating us. And after that experience, I learned to speak to people who had passed over and really, it's really good to know that life carries on. So even if you're contemplating suicide, it won't do you any good because you have to come back next time and deal with the situation. And, oftentimes we feel so overwhelmed and we can't cope, but it's good to work through it and resolve it because there's no getting away from it. Have to deal with it sometime or other, this life or next time round. Sorry. When my mother died at 94, she wouldn't cross over until she'd spoken to me. And that morning I had a feeling she was around, and my friend said she was here, and she said, "Your mother's here," and she was all goosebumps all over her, and she was saying what my mother said, and to clarify and to make sure it was true, I wasn't just making it up, I called my friend in America, Peggy, and she confirmed. My mother said she didn't want to cross over, she had to speak to me. She thanked me for being her daughter. She thanked me for loving her, and she told me a lot of things. And she said once she'd crossed over, she saw what a misery she'd been. And she says, because you have a life review, and she'd lived her life in misery. You know, as a pioneer of Australia, things were tough, and very tough to be a woman raising children, and you know, she lived in the outback of Australia. And she said she was sorry she'd lived her life as a misery, and she was glad that I'd left. And she says, your life is amazing. And she said, now I can enjoy myself. So she has a ball now, and she's all dressed up, and she comes in and out. And she came one time riding a horse like she used to do when she was 17. And so it just proves to me that life carries on. And then we are the ones that have a life review and decide where we didn't do things too well, so we can come back the next time. We choose our parents and the situation which will be of benefit to us. So we're in charge all the time, and we are the ones that make judgment on ourselves, nobody else. God loves us unconditionally. So bearing that in mind, life takes on a different perspective. And after I saw that and spoke to my mother and my father, I thought, well, I'd just clear every issue that I knew about, and even ones I'd delve into, find ones I didn't know about, so I could have a clean slate. So that's the benefits, and our loved ones are still around loving us and cheering us on and so proud of us, really. So love never dies, never ever dies.